The day Celine walked into that boardroom, she was wearing the same gray blazer she'd worn to every quarterly review for the past 3 years. Not because she didn't own anything nicer, but because she had learned, a long time ago, that the best weapon she had was the one nobody saw coming. She set her portfolio down on the far end of the table, the end nearest the door, the one nobody fought over, and she sat down quietly while the room filled with people who had already decided she didn't matter. It hadn't always been like this. Celine Oduya had spent 7 years building something real inside North Haven Capital. Not the kind of real that gets you mentioned in press releases or invited to the partner retreat in Whistler. The other kind, the quiet, unglamorous kind, where you are the one who actually knows how the numbers work, where you are the one the junior analysts come to at 10 at night, when something doesn't add up, where you are the one who catches the error that would have cost the firm $4 million, and then writes it up in an email that your senior partner forwards to the managing director, with his name attached at the top. She knew exactly what she was. She had always known. She just hadn't wanted to believe it would go on forever. Celine was 31. She had a finance degree from Queen's, a CFA she had studied for while working 70-hour weeks, and a reputation inside the firm that could be summarized in 2 words that people said with genuine respect and occasional resentment: she delivers. What she did not have was a title that matched any of that. She was still Associate Portfolio Manager. A title that, 3 years ago, had felt like the beginning of something and now felt like a ceiling someone had painted to look like sky. The managing partner of North Haven Capital was a man named Garrett. No, wait. She caught herself. The man's name was Rowan. No. She stopped again because she had trained herself not to think of him in polite terms anymore. His name was Douglas Vane. He was 54, silver-haired, fond of quoting Warren Buffett in meetings he hadn't prepared for. He had hired Celine because his previous analyst had left, and he needed someone competent immediately, and then, over the course of 7 years, had developed a very specific way of relating to her competence. He used it completely and acknowledged it almost never. The other person at that table who mattered, on the day everything changed, was Douglas's son-in-law. His name was Kieran Vane. He had taken the surname when he married Douglas's daughter 3 years ago. A fact he mentioned in conversation with a frequency that suggested he was not entirely unaware of what it had done for his career. Kieran had been promoted to senior portfolio manager 8 months after joining the firm. He had a business degree from a school whose prestige Celine could not determine, no CFA, a great handshake, and a habit of summarizing other people's ideas in meetings as though he had just thought of them for the first time. Celine had trained Kieran. She had sat with him for 2 months when he first arrived, walking him through their portfolio models, the client segmentation approach, the risk assessment framework she had built herself over 4 years of iteration. She had done this without complaint because she believed, at the time, that the right thing to do was to be generous, to be a team player, to trust that the people above her were paying attention. She had been wrong about that last part. The quarterly strategy meeting that changed everything was held on a Thursday morning in October. The leaves outside the 32nd floor windows had gone the color of embers, and the light came in sideways and cold. The way it does in Toronto in autumn, when the city seems to be reminding you that warmth is something you have to earn here. Douglas opened the meeting by announcing, without particular ceremony, that North Haven Capital was being restructured. Celine felt something shift in her chest. Not panic. She was past the age of panic. Something more like a door closing in a house she'd thought was hers. The restructuring, Douglas explained, involved consolidating the 2 portfolio divisions into one. The new combined division would be led by a single director of portfolio strategy, a role that was being created specifically for this transition. He paused, the way people pause when they're about to say something they know is going to matter to someone in the room. Kieran was going to be appointed director of portfolio strategy. Celine watched the faces around the table respond. The careful nods, the performed enthusiasm, the particular blankness of people who had opinions they weren't willing to have out loud. She watched Douglas avoid her eyes with the practiced ease of a man who had done it before. She watched Kieran accept the congratulations being passed around the table like something he had been expecting for a long time, which, she supposed, he had. She did not say anything. She picked up her pen and she wrote the date at the top of her notepad and she breathed. What none of them knew. What none of them could have known, because she had been very deliberate about keeping it separate, was what Celine had been doing with her evenings and her weekends for the past 4 years. She had started the fund almost by accident. It began with a conversation at a conference in Montreal, 3 years into her time at North Haven. When she was sitting at the bar after the second day's sessions, and a woman named Elowen sat down next to her and ordered an espresso at 8:30 in the evening. Elowen ran a small family office out of Ottawa, managing money for 3 extended families of West African heritage who had built significant wealth across real estate, manufacturing and healthcare, and who wanted a particular kind of investment approach that took ESG seriously in ways the large institutions had not yet figured out how to do without it becoming a marketing exercise. They talked for 4 hours. Celine missed her flight home. She didn't care. What Elowen was describing was a problem Celine had been thinking about for years. Not because she'd been tasked with solving it, but because it was the kind of problem that her mind kept returning to at 2 in the morning when she should have been sleeping. The intersection of community wealth, long-horizon investment strategy, and the specific risk tolerance of families who had built things with their hands and didn't want to lose them. She went home. She spent 3 months building a framework. She sent it to Elowen on a Saturday afternoon with a message that said, simply, "Thoughts?" Elowen called her within the hour. That was the beginning of what Celine quietly, carefully, over the following years, built into Oduya Capital Partners, a boutique impact investment firm that she registered in her mother's name initially, for reasons that had partly to do with privacy and partly to do with something deeper that she hadn't fully examined yet. The firm managed, by the time of that October board meeting at North Haven, assets of approximately $340 million across 14 family clients. It had never been written about. It had no website beyond a contact page. Its reputation existed entirely through the network of people who had worked with it and told others. The old, slow, reliable way. Celine had never told anyone at North Haven, not because she was hiding something. She had checked the conflict of interest provisions 3 times and had kept the client profiles scrupulously distinct from anything North Haven touched. She had simply not told them because no one had ever asked her who she was outside of what she could do for them, and she had gotten tired, somewhere around year 4, of offering that information uninvited. The meeting continued. Douglas walked through the new reporting structure. Kieran would oversee both divisions. There would be a review of all associate-level roles over the following 30 days. Then Douglas said the thing that mattered. Given the restructure, he said, glancing at his notes rather than at her, we're going to be looking hard at whether all of our current positions at the associate level represent the best use of the firm's resources going forward. Celine put her pen down. She understood what he meant. Everyone in the room understood what he meant. What he meant was, we're going to see if we can replace expensive experience with cheaper inexperience. And he was saying it this way because he did not want to have the conversation directly with the person it was aimed at. Kieran cleared his throat. There's an efficiency case to be made, he said, using the voice he used when he was saying something that had been agreed upon in advance. Some of the more senior associate roles have a cost profile that's hard to justify when the responsibilities overlap with what the director position will now be handling. Celine looked at him. He looked back at her for exactly 1 second, then looked at his laptop screen. I think it would be worth acknowledging, Celine said, her voice perfectly level, the way it got when she was at her most dangerous, that the risk assessment framework currently in use across both divisions was built by me. That the quarterly performance reports that go to our top 14 clients were written by me. That the model that identified the Meridian REIT exposure issue last spring, which saved the firm approximately $4 million in client losses, was mine. Douglas's expression did the thing it did when he was calculating whether to be dismissive or conciliatory. Of course your contributions have been. I'm not looking for validation, Celine said. I'm establishing a record, for the meeting notes. There was a silence, the kind of silence that has a shape to it. Then Kieran smiled, the particular smile of someone who thinks he already knows how the story ends. Celine, no one's suggesting your work hasn't been valuable, but the firm has to make decisions based on where it's going, not where it's been. I'm sure you understand that. She looked at him. She thought about 7 years. She thought about the 2 months she had spent training him, patiently, carefully, on a framework she had built herself. She thought about the email he had sent to Douglas last spring with her risk assessment attached, with a subject line that said my analysis of the Meridian situation. I understand perfectly, she said, and she let it sit there. The 30-day review period was, in practice, a formality. She knew that within the first week, when the HR partner asked her to complete a role justification form that she had never been asked to complete before, while Kieran received a memo about his new office. She completed the form. She completed it with the same care she brought to everything. Detailed, precise, documented. She listed every project, every client, every outcome. She attached the Meridian report, original timestamp intact, which showed the document had been created on her work computer and sent internally to Douglas before it appeared in Kieran's email with his name on it. She did not send that last part to HR, she kept it. She was not a person who moved before she was ready. The 30-day review concluded on a Monday. Douglas called her into his office at 4 in the afternoon. He had the particular energy of someone who had rehearsed what he was about to say and was hoping the conversation would stay inside the script. He told her that North Haven had decided to eliminate her position. He thanked her for her 7 years of service. He mentioned the severance package, 14 weeks, which was the legal minimum for her tenure and not $1 more. He said the firm would of course provide a reference. He did not look at her face while he said any of this. Celine sat across from him with her hands folded on her knee and she listened to all of it. When he was done, she said, "I'd like that in writing by end of week." Douglas nodded, visibly relieved that it was going this smoothly. "One more thing," she said. She reached into her portfolio, the same gray portfolio she had brought to every meeting for 3 years, and she removed a single printed document and placed it on his desk. Douglas looked at it, his face changed. It was a client list. 14 names, 14 family offices, with their total assets under management beside each name. At the bottom a total, $340 million. "What is this?" he said. "That's the firm I've been running for the past 4 years. Celine said, "Oduya Capital Partners. We specialize in long-horizon impact investment for high-net-worth family clients. Our annualized return over the past 3 years is 11.4% net of fees." Douglas stared at the document. She could see him doing the math or trying to. "Two of those clients," she continued, "are families you have been actively trying to court for the past 18 months. The Mensa family and the Adeyemi group, you may remember. Kieran pitched them in June. They declined." She watched Douglas's face as he understood. "They were already clients of mine," she said. "They came to me 4 years ago, before Kieran was hired. They declined North Haven's pitch because they told me, directly, that the approach felt performative. Their words, not mine." The silence in the room was very different from the silence in the boardroom 3 weeks earlier. This one was hollow. "I'm not telling you this to negotiate," Celine said, standing. "My position has been eliminated. I accept that. I'm telling you this because I think you deserve to know the full picture of the room you were in." She picked up her portfolio. "I'll have my desk cleared by Wednesday." She did clear her desk by Wednesday. She took her plants, her spare charger, the framed photograph of her mother at Niagara Falls that had sat on her shelf for 7 years. She said goodbye to the junior analysts. A couple of them hugged her, and one of them, a young woman named Sowers, she stopped. "Not that name. A young woman named Blythe. No, not that one either. A young woman whose name she would not use, who was in her 2nd year at the firm and had the particular combination of sharp instincts and quiet intensity that Celine recognized from old photographs of herself, pulled her aside in the hallway and said, very quietly, 'Thank you for everything you taught me. I've been writing it all down.'" Celine told her to keep writing. She told her to build things under her own name. She told her to stop forwarding her best ideas in emails that arrived in other people's inboxes, and then disappeared into someone else's career. The young woman nodded with the kind of seriousness that meant she had already learned this lesson the hard way, and was trying to hold on to it before it faded. The news moved, the way news does inside a small industry, through the invisible network of people who talk to each other at conferences and in coffee shops and in the group texts of people who went to the same schools and ended up on parallel tracks. It moved because someone Celine had worked with years earlier called to check in, and she told him, plainly, what had happened. He told 2 people. Those 2 people told others. Within 3 weeks, the general shape of the story was in circulation. North Haven had let go of the person who had actually built their risk framework, handed the title to the managing partner's son-in-law, and the person they let go had been quietly running a $340 million firm on the side. The part about the Mensa family and the Adeyemi group was the part that caught people's attention most, because both families were known in the industry, known as serious investors who were not easy to reach and were very selective about who managed their money. The fact that North Haven had pitched them and been declined, while the woman they had just fired already had them as clients, said something that didn't need to be elaborated upon. Douglas called her 2 weeks after she left. She did not answer. He called again the following week. She did not answer that time either. He sent an email. She read it once, on a Tuesday morning, sitting at the kitchen table with her coffee. The email said that North Haven was interested in exploring a potential partnership arrangement with Oduya Capital Partners, and that he hoped they could find a time to talk. She closed the email. She thought about it for a moment. Not the decision, which was not a decision, but the feeling of it. 7 years. 14 weeks of severance. The look on his face when he'd said the firm had to make decisions based on where it was going. She opened a new email and typed 4 sentences. She thanked him for reaching out. She noted that Aduya Capital Partners was not currently seeking institutional partnerships. She wished North Haven well in its restructuring. She signed it with her full name and her title, Celine Aduya, founder and managing partner. She sent it, finished her coffee, and went back to work. Kieran's tenure as director of portfolio strategy lasted 8 months. This was not information Celine sought out, but it reached her anyway, the way things do. The restructuring he had overseen had not gone smoothly. 2 of North Haven's mid-tier clients had moved their accounts following the transition, citing concerns about continuity of service. The Meridian REIT position, which had been flagged and managed under the framework Celine had built, was mishandled in the second quarter. The issue was smaller than it might have been, but it was the kind of mistake that does not stay quiet. By the following spring, Kieran had been moved to a client relations role, a gentler title for a smaller responsibility, and the portfolio division was being run by someone brought in from outside. Celine heard about this over lunch with Elo and Ajay, who had heard it from someone on Bay Street, who had heard it from someone at a golf weekend. "Does it make you feel better?" Elawan asked in the direct way she had, pouring more water into both their glasses. Celine thought about it honestly. "It makes me feel like the work mattered," she said. "Not the same thing." Elawan nodded. She understood the distinction. Aduya Capital Partners moved into its first proper office. Until then, Celine had run everything from her apartment and, briefly, a shared co-working space in Kensington Market. On the 1st of March, in a building on Adelaide Street with windows that looked west over the city. It was a modest space. 4 private offices, a meeting room with a round table that could seat 8, a small kitchen where someone always seemed to be making tea. She hired 3 people in the first year. She was deliberate about it. She looked for people who built things quietly and got credit for them rarely. She looked for people who had been trained well by someone else and then overlooked. She looked for the sea lines of their current firms. The ones who arrived early, stayed late, whose names appeared in footnotes and disappeared from subject lines. She didn't tell them that's what she was looking for. But they seemed to know in the way that people recognize something true even when it isn't stated directly. There was a profile of her eventually. 2 years after she left North Haven, in a financial publication that covered boutique and independent investment firms in Canada. It was not a long profile. It mentioned the firm's AUM, now past the $500 million mark. It mentioned the ESG framework. It quoted Celine once, near the end. The journalist had asked her what she wanted people to know about Aduya Capital Partners. She had thought about it for a moment before answering. "That we take the long view," she said, "on everything." She ran into Douglas once, by coincidence, at a fundraiser for a children's hospital foundation in November. He was with his wife. He looked older than she remembered, or maybe she had simply not looked at him carefully enough before. He saw her across the room and did the thing people do when they are trying to decide whether to approach or to make themselves suddenly interested in the appetizer table. He approached. She gave him credit for that. They spoke for about 4 minutes. He said the firm was well. She said she was glad to hear it. He said she looked like things were going well for her. She said they were. He asked if there was any possibility of revisiting a conversation about a partnership arrangement, in whatever form made sense, and she said with the same tone she had used for the entire conversation, warm, steady, genuine, that she didn't think Aduya Capital was in a place where that kind of arrangement made sense for their model. He nodded. He said he understood. He said it genuinely, she thought, or as close to genuinely as a person can manage when they are standing in front of something they had underestimated for 7 years and are only now, fully, understanding its actual dimensions. "You were always the best person in the room," he said. It came out strangely, not quite an apology, not quite a compliment. Something in between that had been sitting in him for a while and finally found its way out in a hospital fundraising room in November. Celine looked at him for a moment. She thought about saying something precise and final that he would think about for the rest of the evening. Instead, she said, simply, "I know." She smiled, not unkindly, and she went back to the people she had come with. The room was full and warm, and the work, as always, was waiting for her in the morning.